What's the best nonviolent revenge you've pulled on a rude/cheating boss? How did you actually get even and survive to tell the tale? It was a cold, rainy Wednesday when it happened. The kind of day when you don't want to get out of bed, but you do anyway because life keeps moving whether you're ready for it or not. I've been working at Alderman Financial for 3 years, always staying late, hitting every deadline, getting nothing but praise from my bosses. At least until that morning. The email came through around 8:15 a.m., right after I grabbed my second cup of coffee from the break room. Subject line, urgent. Meet in conference room B now. The first thing I thought was that it had to be some kind of mistake. I hadn't done anything wrong. In fact, I just finished up a big project, one of the biggest of my career, and everything was on track. Everything had been perfect. So when I walked into that conference room and saw my boss, Carla, sitting there with HR, I already knew something was off. "Sit down, Derek," she said, but her voice was tight, like she was trying to be professional, but the words were fighting their way out that I sat, my stomach sinking. "We need to talk about your recent work on the Miller account," she continued. I didn't know where this was going. "I'm really sorry, but we're going to have to let you go." The words hit me like a punch. I don't know what I expected, but it wasn't that. I had to fight to keep my hands from shaking. I'd never been fired before. Hell, I hadn't even been written up. Not once. Wait, what? I don't understand. The Miller account was finished. Everything was approved last week. What's going on? Carla didn't look at me directly. She just folded her hands on the table, keeping her eyes on the papers in front of her. HR was silent, like they didn't even need to be there. "It's the final report, Derek," Carla said, her voice cold now. "There was a significant error in your calculations. You were the one who signed off on it, and it led to a major discrepancy in the numbers." My heart skipped. The Miller account had been a joint effort, but the final report? That was mine. Still, there was no way that could be right. I checked it. Twice. I double-checked everything. "No," I said, shaking my head. "No, I didn't make an error. I double-checked everything. It has to be someone else's mistake." Carla didn't blink. "Derek, I'm sorry. It's done. We're already in damage control mode." I felt the world tilt beneath me. I tried to stay calm, tried to process what she was saying, but the room was spinning. I wanted to scream. I wanted to argue, but I knew I wouldn't win this fight. That I stood up slowly, my mind racing. The shame burned through me, hotter than the anger. "You're firing me because of something I didn't do?" "Derek," Carla said softly, almost pityingly, "it's not personal, but the numbers are wrong. I can't risk this kind of mistake costing us clients." "Then fix it," I blurted out before I could stop myself. "Don't throw me out for something that wasn't my fault. You didn't even check. You didn't even investigate." HR spoke then, their voice mechanical. "We've already investigated the issue. The decision is final." I left that room feeling like I was floating. My mind was still trying to process it, trying to piece together how this had even happened. I wasn't stupid. I didn't make mistakes like that. Not big ones. The only thing that made sense was someone else had messed up and pinned it on me that I spent the next few days in a fog. Too angry to think clearly, too tired to do anything about it. The idea that Carla, who'd always praised my work, had just let me fall for something that wasn't even my fault, ate at me like acid. I felt the sting of betrayal more than the sting of the firing itself. Then I remembered the details that I had a conversation with Greg, the senior analyst, about the Miller numbers. I'd sent him an email a week before finalizing the report, asking for confirmation on a particular set of figures. Greg had been vague, promised he'd get back to me, but never did. I had assumed he'd fix the issue, but now I realized that the discrepancy must have been something he overlooked. Or worse, something he did on purpose that I couldn't just let it go. I wasn't going to let Greg get away with this. And I wasn't going to let Carla or HR walk away without having to answer for their part in it. I started putting things together, small details at first. I pulled up my emails, my reports. I made a few calls. I started digging, even using a couple of the company's internal systems to track who'd signed off on what and when. It didn't take long to uncover the truth. Greg had made the mistake in his analysis and had ignored my request for clarification. When the numbers didn't match up, he'd quickly sent me an email, pretending to cover himself by blaming me for the error. He knew Carla would trust me, but wouldn't double check. He knew he could throw me under the bus and get away with it. I wasn't going to let him. I took everything I found and compiled it into a neat, irrefutable case. I had proof that Greg had ignored my emails and had failed to perform his duties properly. I had the email chain, the signed-off reports, the timestamps, everything I needed to make him look like the fool he was. But I wasn't going to go to HR with it. I wasn't going to give Carla the satisfaction of thinking she'd come out clean. No, I was going to make sure this got out in a way that would hurt them both. I started with a subtle approach. First, I sent an anonymous tip to the board of directors, including the full chain of events and outlining how Greg had mishandled his responsibilities. I made sure to include the full timeline, showing that Carla had been negligent in checking the final report. I knew the board would be interested in this, especially when they realized the cost of the mistake could be tied back to poor oversight. Then, I turned my attention to Greg. I had his personal email address, something he'd foolishly used to send me a message about the Miller account. I crafted an email, a quiet but firm message. I warned him that if he didn't take responsibility for his part in the mess, I'd make sure everyone knew how he'd thrown me under the bus. The last thing he needed was a reputation as someone who couldn't be trusted with numbers, or worse, someone who couldn't be trusted with clients that didn't expect Greg to respond right away. In fact, I figured he'd ignore it, but it didn't matter. The seed was planted, and the board, once they got a glimpse of the mess, would be digging for more answers. It was a matter of time. By the time I was halfway through packing up my things for good, I saw the email from Carla. She was trying to reach me, offering me a revised severance package and inviting me back for a conversation about the future of my career. It was laughable. They knew they'd made a mistake, but their pride wouldn't let them admit it that I didn't reply. I didn't need it. A couple of weeks later, I got word that Greg had been removed from the Miller account, and Carla had been given a written warning about her failure to properly manage the team. A quiet victory, but it felt good. And though I wasn't back in the office, I knew I'd had the last word, and that's all I really needed. I had been with the company for 3 years, a small but ambitious tech startup in downtown San Francisco. We were all wearing multiple hats, pushing boundaries, and building the kind of culture where late nights were expected and a passion for innovation was the only thing that mattered. I bought into that ethos, probably too much, but somewhere along the way, I lost track of myself. I stopped noticing the creeping changes, the long hours, the emails that started pouring in after midnight, the constant pressure to do more. It wasn't just the workload that bothered me, it was the way I was treated. My boss, Emma, a sharp, polished woman who'd risen through the ranks faster than anyone, was always looking for ways to maximize the team's productivity. She made sure to tell us how much she was counting on us for the company's next big move. IT first. It was fine. I was happy to prove myself. I'd taken on extra projects, worked weekends, and even gave up personal plans to meet deadlines. That's what we were supposed to do, right? The hustle culture. But soon, I realized Emma didn't care about the team. She cared about herself, her career, her title. Everything was about her next promotion, and if that meant throwing her people under the bus, so be it. IT wasn't until the bonus structure changed that I truly understood how far she would go. I'd been tracking my hours, reviewing my performance against the new targets, and I knew I'd done more than enough to earn the bonus promised to me at the start of the quarter. I had exceeded every metric, helped the team hit its goals, and even brought in a new client. I was on track to be rewarded for my efforts, or so I thought. When the bonuses were finally announced, I felt a knot in my stomach. I checked the email, then checked it again, just to be sure. My bonus? It was significantly lower than expected. In fact, it was laughable compared to what my peers received. The worst part? Emma's bonus was 5 times higher than mine. I approached her office later that day, holding the email in my hand. She was behind her desk, typing away, not even looking up. "Emma," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "I was expecting a bonus closer to what we discussed. Can we talk about it?" She looked up, her expression neutral, but her eyes cold. "What's there to talk about, Jenna? You've been great, but the numbers just didn't line up." I could feel my heart rate spike. "What do you mean?" "I exceeded every target. I worked overtime. I did everything asked of me, and more." Emma shrugged, as if it was no big deal. Well, some people just don't get the same reward. You should be grateful for what you got. I didn't even know what to say. It felt like a slap in the face, especially when I realized she had received such a huge bonus. She had done little more than sit in meetings and approve things while the rest of us were grinding out every task. But I wasn't about to let her win. Not this time. The next few days were a blur. I couldn't stop thinking about the bonus. I stewed over it in silence, but inside I was seething. I'd spent years at that company, and Emma had taken everything she could from me and everyone else while rewarding herself. But there was no way I was going to let this slide. I started paying attention. I started digging. Emma wasn't as careful as she thought. I found the emails between her and the CEO, where she had carefully maneuvered her way into taking credit for a project I had led. I had put together the entire proposal, the strategy, and most of the execution. But Emma had made sure to place herself at the center of it all, taking the glory while I got nothing. That I knew exactly what I had to do. That I spent the next few weeks preparing. I kept a record of all our conversations, made sure I had proof of the work I had done on the project, and gathered testimonials from colleagues who knew what really went down. I also started working on a plan to present all of it in a way that would be impossible to ignore. That I waited until the end of the quarter, just before the next performance reviews went out. I sent an anonymous email to the entire board of directors, outlining the discrepancies between Emma's claims and the reality of the work. I included the emails between her and the CEO, as well as evidence of her manipulation. I made sure it was clear that she had taken credit for work that wasn't hers and had skewed the bonus structure to her own advantage. Then I sat back and waited. Within a week, Emma was called into an emergency meeting with the board. There were whispers, meetings behind closed doors, and a lot of nervous energy circulating through the office. When Emma finally came out, her face was pale. She didn't speak to anyone that day. By the time the next round of bonuses came around, I had already moved on to a new company. But my revenge wasn't just about the money. It was about making sure that no one would forget how she'd taken credit for my work and manipulated her way to the top. Months later, I got wind of what had happened. Emma was no longer in charge of our department. Her reputation had taken a major hit. The board had decided to hold an internal review, and Emma had been quietly demoted. There were rumors that she was still with the company, but her influence had crumbled, her power reduced to nothing. That IT was more than just sweet. It was satisfying. And as I moved on with my new job, knowing I'd escaped that toxic environment, I couldn't help but feel a small sense of pride. I had done more than just get even. I had exposed the truth.